Good evening and welcome to 2020 Vision, our weekly attempt to try and put some modern thinking and modern vision on the news across East London. I'm Jenny Fisher, editor of East London News, and this evening it's the turn of regular guest Councillor Paul Merry, late of this parish of Tower Hamlets and currently a councillor with the London Borough of Redbridge. Good evening, Paul. Good evening, Jenny.
Good evening, Jennifer. How are you?
Are
you still
now.
shielding? Have you been released into the community at all?
No, I'm going to phone my doctor and find out if I can be allowed out, but I'm shielding at the moment. So
yes, well, don't rush it. But I did have the exciting experience of coming down to the Isle of Dogs this week to go to my dentist.
Oh, really?
Which just reopened, down at Amsterdam Court.
That's a shame.
That was an excitement. Bits of the island have changed yet again that I failed to recognise.
Well, what I found, because although I'm shielding, I'm allowed to go out outdoors if I dodge people. It's surprising actually how many really nice walks there are around the Isle of Dogs now, which there didn't. Yeah, I don't remember there being. I haven't tried to walk around much before, but there's all quite sort of like parky bits and wild bits and lots of water. I'm getting to really like the water. It's ridiculous. I've lived on the Isle of Dogs for 38 years and never really appreciated the water.
Yes, I think you can get to it easier these days. I had a little wander around back in the Amsterdam Court where it goes down to the river. Thursday I was down the dentist and there was a lot of people on the shingle beach. Some of them even swimming in the Thames, which is not something I'd probably risk, but there seem to be lots of people about.
No, don't try that at home. If you live on the Isle of Dogs or anywhere in Tower Hamlets, don't swim in the Thames. It's a bad idea. And don't swim in the docks either. That's worse.
Recommend it.
Okay, right. Well, this evening we're going to be talking about democracy across East London. And so I'm going to announce the phone number that you can use to ring in and join us. Ring into the studio on 0208 12345 07. The number's on the screen there, 0208 12345 07. Two big things have happened this week, I think, and both of them have got something to do with mares, as in mayors, not mares, not female horses. And one of them, of course, is that the Tower Hamlets strike, unison strike, has been carrying on. Have you been following that, Paul?
Yeah, I've caught some news. I think they are on day 6, 6-day strike. Yeah, a lot of people I know are NEU members who aren't currently out on strike, but I do know a few Tower Hamlets unison members that are currently striking.
Well, it seems to have gone very well.
Some leverage.
Seems to have gone very well from the point of view of the strikers. The strike's been strongly supported. A lot of unison branches, particularly from across London, have sent in support. Trade union branches and trades councils, or other trade unions and trades councils from across the country are beginning to get in touch. So the issue is really being talked about, and Dave Prentice has been very strong in support of the council workers as well. So we're sort of really left wondering that the big question really is, why is the council doing this? There was some talk that...
Yes. I can't give you an answer to that, but I mean, I'm not aware of any other councils, Labour councils in particular, or any councils for that matter, that are going down this particular road. So it's a mystery to those of us that look on from afar.
It's a mystery from quite close. I can almost see the town hall from where I live, and it's quite a mystery to us as well. There's some various suggestions have come round. One that the chief exec thought he'd have a bit of a tidy up and try and remove what he saw as our antediluvian extra terms and conditions, and what the trade unions probably saw as their hard-won extras. There's some suggestion that he was worried that the redundancy package in Tower Hamlets was so generous that should the council have to make workers redundant, it would be very costly. To which the answer could have been, well, don't make people redundant. Then that would mean that you didn't spend any money at all. But he seems to be changing the terms instead. So if you've been on strike in Tower Hamlets, or if you've been supporting the strike in Tower Hamlets, do ring in 0208 1234507. Do ring in and tell us what your experience has been. It seems to have been enjoyable on the picket lines with a lot of public support. Conversely, of course, I mean, we keep inviting John Biggs, and that's been a funny thing as well. Because I've been emailing the council press office, inviting John Biggs to come on this show and talk about why he's doing the changes in contracts. And initially, there was a sort of parallel move. On the one hand, I was emailing them about a strange quirk whereby you could only take part in an online consultation in Tower Hamlets if you gave them your email address and quite a lot of personal information if you had to register to be part of a consultation. Which so I wrote to them and said, why do you have to give your? And they said, oh, that makes the consultation more robust. So I couldn't really work that out. I'm not quite sure why. I've asked them why. No reply yet. But alongside that, I asked if John Biggs would like to come on this programme and explain why he's doing the changes. And I didn't get a reply for 5 weeks. And after 5 weeks, I got the reply, I'm sorry, your email has been stuck in the spam filter. So that made me worry as to why the email about the strike was stuck in the spam filter, but the spam filter didn't pick up the email about the consultation system. And secondly, why it takes them 5 weeks to check their spam filter to see what's stuck in it. So I wrote back saying, I can't remember what I was saying. Would John Biggs like to come? That's right. That was it. Your email was stuck in the spam. The reply is, look at our press release on Tower Rewards for the particular question that I had asked. But they didn't say anything about whether John Biggs would like to come on the show. So I had to write back, and I've heard nothing again since then. So we can only assume that this is yet another Tuesday evening when John Biggs is washing his hair and doesn't want to come out and talk about Tower Rewards. So that's the end of that.
You need to persist.
I think there's very little danger of me doing anything else. Yes, I think What?
No, I'm not a great one for checking my spam filter all that often. So it could be, but you'd think John might have a few PAs checking it.
Well, this is the communications department, so I could have been the Guardian or the Wall Street Journal. Now I was stuck in the spam filter, so I was a bit put out by that. But I've written back saying that I think they need to have a look. We should just explain that growling. It's not Paul's stomach; it's because he's got a dog sat nearby, I think. Yes.
That's a dog
running
through the room.
What was I saying? Yes, I was saying that I've written back to the council checking that they should check their spam filter, suggesting they should check their spam filter more often. If we were having actual meetings of the council, I think I'd be very minded to bring a public petition to the council just so that everybody knew about the difficulty people have got emailing them, and suggesting that the council adopt a policy on checking spam filters. But there we are. There's no meetings at the moment, so I'm not sure I can fit that in. Right, anyway, we're waffling on here about the strike. As I said, if you're involved in the strike, do ring in 0208 1234507. And if otherwise, we will move on to talking about the other bit of news. One bit of news this week is Tower Hamlets can't do anything with its mayor. And the second news is that Newham is very much thinking of doing something with its mayor, and that is having a referendum on whether to have one. And the person who's actually strongly in favour of having the referendum is the mayor. So she stood on a manifesto of saying that she would have a referendum on whether to continue with the mayoral system, and that's exactly what she's doing. So that's an advantage. So But the review that Newham has done doesn't only look at the directly elected mayor, it looks at lots of other aspects of democracy. So, look, Paul, you're an elected councillor. How do you find out what people want you to do for them?
Well, yeah, consultation is an art, and it's my background, of course. There's some very interesting stuff in the Newham report beyond just whether Newham should go on with having an executive mayor or not. So it's really, I mean, we all know that levels of engagement are dropping in local government in terms of voter turnout and participation in traditional meetings and so on. So, you've got to look at ways of moving beyond that into encouraging greater participation and devolving decision-making power in order to get people to take local services seriously and engage with them. We are moving that way in Redbridge. I mean, we operate a fairly traditional strong leader and cabinet system. We've never looked at a mayoral option. But we are moving strongly towards co-production with residents on regeneration schemes and third voluntary sector
Paul,
service provision in particular.
Can you just explain what co-production means? It's a relatively new word, but it's being used a lot by local government at the moment. What on earth is it?
Yes, I'll give you my understanding. I mean, this may not be the OED definition, but it's basically engaging with service users and service providers and engaging with them from the off on designing services and the commissioning of services, not just as is traditional local government officers coming up with a scheme, putting it before residents and saying, do you like this or not? And then pushing it into the council system for a decision. So
we have an even more. We have an even more modern system in Tower Hamlets. In Tower Hamlets, our modern system of consultation is we take the decision about what we're going to do, and then we have a short statutory consultation period where we ask people for their comments on what we've decided we're going to do, and then we ignore any comments and we do it anyway. So this is even more modern and up to date.
Yeah, well, I don't think that system is unique to Tower Hamlets. No. It's pretty much the old school way of doing things. And I mean, there are a lot of councillors around who've been in the game a long time and are even older than I are used to doing things a certain way. And like all things, trying to get people to embrace change is not the easiest of things, even Labour councillors. But I think, I don't think there's any doubt that we modern consumers of services need to be involved in the design and the provision of services.
But this is what I don't. This is what I don't understand, because you're talking about co-production like it was a good thing, and you're talking about the way you're talking about it suggests that it could be a good thing. I mean, we've had some wobbles in Tower Hamlets with things like co-production without using that word. But if there's a lack of citizen, resident, whatever you want to call them, engagement, why are they all going to get involved in co-production? And what worries me is that co-production is going to involve 2 or 3 local busybodies rather than a representative group. So how do you guard against that?
Well, yes, you need good consultation experts, professionals to run these things. Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing to do is just round up the 3 most likely suspects and call them the community. It's about encouraging people and making it possible for a wide and diverse cross-section of the population to engage. Yes, and it can be done. I mean, I spent years doing it in Hackney. It's not even possible, but you've got to have the political will, and you've got to have the resourcing to make it happen. Right. But at the end of the day, I mean, you can't force people at the point of a sharp or blunt instrument to to engage with you if they don't want to. But there are ways of encouraging people, like simply. In Hackney, we used to offer out vouchers for engaging in various activities and surveys and so on. Make childcare available, transport even. Although these days, obviously, almost everything's going to have to be done online for the foreseeable. But it's only a matter of having a strategy and sufficient resources to implement it. It's not...
I always thought the vouchers thing was just patronising. Transport, in some circumstances, good. Childcare, obviously good. But it's like you go as a tenant. You go to consultation meetings occasionally, or I used to, and you'd sit there and you'd look around, and there were all these officers being paid really substantial hourly rates, and you'd sit there with your voucher, and you'd think, well, actually, does this make me representative? The fact I've got a voucher? Have I had to consult any other residents on the views that I'm giving in order to get my voucher? No, it's just giving out vouchers still relies on me having the time to turn up to a place that the well-paid officers suggest. So I thought it was not as good as an incentive as making residents feel that if they did bother to turn up, the consulting body would actually pay any attention to them. That was the key.
You've got to create the sort of belief in residents that they are engaging in a process where they're actually going to have, their views going to be taken into consideration at the end. But I think more progressive authorities are moving in that direction. I think the days of I'm the boss, I know it all, follow me, is gone in this modern age.
But then we come back to the executive mayor thing again.
Yes. Well, I've personally never been a great fan of the executive mayor model, because it supposedly gives you this focus and dynamism, which it may indeed, but my view always was that it just puts too much power in one person's hands, and how accountable are they? Labour groups tend to become nothing more than a scrutiny body. You lose any control. I think, what was it? In the Newham arrangement, it took a petition of 10,000 residents for a recall process, which is all a bit long-winded. I mean, we seem to be getting along quite well in Redbridge, and many other authorities are getting along quite happily without an executive mayor. I don't think it's a particular guarantee of anything, and if anything, you tend to lose accountability and a level of democratic involvement because of it.
I mean, that's
I think I was shouting for to become a feature of Redbridge's governance system.
Well, that's a relief. I think that the executive mayor in Tower Hamlets, although it came in for its own reasons, very much, it's not so much what it did, but what it didn't do. If you compare it with the system it replaced, which was where the council had committees, and we didn't replace it directly. It did directly replace the leader plus cabinet model. But if you think back to the days when we had committees, the point was that each committee chair, who in modern parlance is a cabinet member, would have a committee of councillors. And so that committee, those councillors on that committee would all participate and get involved and get an expertise in a particular area of that service. Somebody would be the vice chair and able to maybe try out being a chair before they became a chair. But still, I remember on the education committee in Tower Hamlets, one of the councillors who was on the education committee took the issue of school governors and did a lot of work to get them more representative, to get them better trained, to get them better talking to each other, so that the authorities' views on education, could be much more clearly put across at school level. And that's just, we've got one executive mayor who's responsible for everything. Inevitably, there's no role for councillors, no place for councillors to come in and take a specific little area, as well as governors. Somebody else got very involved in breakfast clubs, which were very new as an idea then. And so that role of the councillors in developing potential new policies and services is just lost, and everything becomes much more officer-led, which I don't think is always a good thing. So I think that was also the problem with the executive mayor system. You lost all this input from councillors. Are you on any committees or cabinets, Paul? Have you been in the cabinet yet?
No, I am not a cabinet member, and I've no great desire to be a cabinet member. Since I retired from local government, I was looking for a slightly more stress-free life. Taking on being a cabinet member wouldn't be something I was desperately keen on. Now, I'm a scrutiny chair in Redbridge, and I think I'm much more suited to that role. I like asking questions and trying to initiate things rather than being responsible for the actually nuts and bolts delivery. I did that for 34 years in local government. I'm quite happy to have a break from that these days.
Well, do you think that the scrutiny committee structure is effective, worth the money that we spend on it, better than the previous alternative of having councillors sat round with officers in an open committee? What's it got going for it?
It seems to work for us in Redbridge. I think we've got a fairly good scrutiny system. It's certainly not just a question of people nodding along and agreeing what the executive says all the time. I don't know. I mean, I think what really matters is what happens on the ground. I mean, one of the problems with one of the drawbacks with mayors, rather like a leader in cabinet system, is who the leader or the mayor appoints as cabinet members. Are they actually good cabinet members? Are they capable of delivering stuff, doing the job? And of course that depends on all the councillors you've got to draw from and who's seen as fitting the job. But it doesn't seem to have any the traditional. I'm not a great lover of the old traditional committee system. As I say, the leader and cabinet system seems to work for us in Redbridge in getting most of our getting our policy objectives delivered. The leader and the cabinet are still answerable to the Labour group and to the scrutiny committees at the end of the day. I mean, they don't have a free range to.
So the scrutiny committees the scrutiny committees are able to say, "Oi, why did you do that then? That looks a bit odd."
Yeah, that's exactly.
And what about policy development? I mean, rather than wait for the cabinet to announce something dim, who actually develops the policies in Redbridge with its leader system?
Yeah, well, I mean, policy developed through the cabinet and the leader goes into the work programme for the cabinet. But I'm sure there's no shortage of people in Redbridge Labour Group who are coming forward with policy ideas that they are lobbying the rest of the group and cabinet members and the leader about. There's certainly no shortage of people with ideas. What we've got is a shortage of resources and time to deal with all of them.
But doesn't that sort of, what's the word? There's a word for it. Doesn't that make it all a bit of a mess? Because if you're an individual councillor, or maybe 2 or 3 councillors in one ward, you've got an idea. You've got to go and lobby the mayor or lobby the cabinet member for whatever, and say, can I persuade you to back my idea, and then we'll go to the Labour group and try and get them to adopt it, and then see what the officers think. It's very distant from actual collective policy development, where 10 of you are sort of locked in a room. Right, we all support. We're all knowledgeable about education, maybe from different angles. Let's sit and think. what kind of education do we want to see delivered in this borough? What are our priorities? What are our financial priorities? And what are our engagement priorities? All that sort of collective ideas, and where you come up with policies that are greater than the sum of the parts. It seems all to be lost in favour of this sort of USA style. I have an idea. Let me lobby for it.
Well, don't know about other Labour groups, but I mean, we do have collective sessions where policy development occurs. But also what we have as part of the council structure are numerous task and finish working groups.
Really?
Yeah. And that's where, backbench councillors with a bit of oomph and a bit of interest go to do policy development. I mean, I'm currently on one on transport and the environment. There's another task and finish group running on climate change and the climate emergency. Last year I was on task and finish group for parking, 2 or 3. So every year there's 4 or 5 task and finish groups that are working that backbench councillors basically volunteer for a subject area they're particularly interested in. And that's backbenchers' opportunity to get involved in policy development through the council structure.
Yeah, never had come across that here in Tower Hamlets at all. Never. I think all we've got is like a feeding frenzy where once a year the mayor hands out the jobs, and then everyone who gets one has to be on best behaviour for the year, and everyone who doesn't get one has to be on best behaviour for the year, hoping they'll get one next year. So that's a completely revolutionary idea.
I'm not entirely. It's a long time since I left Tower Hamlets, both as an employee, a resident, and a party member. So I'm not sure how it works down there these days, but I think it's slightly different in Redbridge.
Okay, well,
as I say, I think Newham are moving in the direction that a lot of local authorities are going to be moving in over the next few years.
Namely, by having all these fancy ways of involving residents, do you mean?
Yeah.
Because this was sort of what I was coming on to. I mean, that's interesting to talk about councillors and their role with the executive. But of course, the other side is getting residents to actually feel that what they say is going to be listened to, which again in Tower Hamlets I think is lacking. So how do you think people can best be consulted? I mean, you said a bit in terms of incentivising people, but and we've talked about consultation. But I did see in the Newham report that 2 words that that made me seethe a little bit. Some words didn't make me seethe, looked quite interesting, but I saw citizens' assembly, which I think is ghastly. What do you think about citizens' assemblies?
They can have a role. I mean, a citizens' assembly, I mean, really, it's just a glorified focus group, isn't it, at the end of the day? No harm in having them. Where you get them from is the question. What's the sort of filtering system, the appointment system? But yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's not the end of the world. Having a very large focus group that you discuss issues with and get a feeling for what people think and feel on the subject. So I think they have a role, but they're not some sort of golden bullet.
Well, how often do you
solve your problems?
How often do you have full council meetings?
Full council. Good question. Probably about every 2 months, I would think.
Right. And do members of the public have any role in that?
Sorry?
Do members of the public have any role in that? Like, is there a facility for the public to ask questions?
Fairly limited under our current governance structure. There's a couple of a couple of public participation items on each full council for deputations, petitions, and speakers' questions to members, which is fairly well taken up in Redbridge, but it's fairly traditional, old school.
And if, dear listener, if you have a view on citizens' assemblies and these other methods of consultation and participation, do call in 0208 1234507. We'd love to hear from you. I know you're all very shy, and I get lots of WhatsApp messages after the show say, "Oh, why did you say this? Why did you say that?" So do feel free to ring in and put your views across as well. But I think that I think there's a real problem with councils being such a hybrid body. You sort of want whoever has power in your local authority, if it's the council or the mayor or whatever, you want people to have the ability to bring petitions, to raise an issue of concern. But this, agenda item 7 is 3 petitions from members of the public. It just gets hijacked by the political parties. You get the Labour Party itself coming up with various stooges in the community to say, can I just petition the council to say that what you're doing in locality, insert name of locality, is absolutely fab and we love it. And then you get some other political party organising their supporters to come along and say, what you're doing in that locality is dreadful and we all hate it. And you can't actually get beyond that sort of political party infighting on the council to find out what the community actually really thinks, although the community may well be divided. And I did have one experience listening to a debate between people who thought it was a really good idea to block off a road and a really bad idea to block off a road, and they both had very good arguments, I must admit. So citizens' assemblies I don't think helps, because it's just like, what's the council? It's a number of people who are elected every 4 years. What's a citizens' assembly? A number of people who are elected probably every 4 years. Why are they any addition to the people who've been elected? You've got elected councillors on a very big poll after quite a democratic exercise, and then you've got your citizens' assembly selected presumably not on a different poll with their vouchers. So I'm not impressed with that myself.
I'd say I don't think citizens' assemblies are some sort of golden bullet to community engagement and higher levels of participation.
And the other thing I saw in the Newham report that distressed me was budget forums. Budget forums I find extremely distressing. Have you ever had one?
I've not experienced a budget forum in my Redbridge time. The budget consultation we do is all online. If you're interested in budget, it's quite exciting. You can jig the budget about and decide where you'd like to prioritise and so on. And the response rates aren't bad, and it does give you an indication of what people consider to be the priorities.
I mean, again,
I wouldn't desperately want to advocate sitting in a room at a local level talking about budgets in detail. I think the amount of people you've got to turn up might be somewhat limited.
Well, again, I think they're really patronising these budget consultation forums. We've had various of them in town. They were brought in by Professor Michael Keith in his day as part of his new consultation schools of thought. And I think they're patronising because they, on the one hand, if you have them just as a budget consultation, you don't give members of the public the same access to information as the councillors or the officers have when they set the budget. So the people are bound to come along and sort of say, well, let's spend money on this. And then what did I hear? I was in the public gallery at a cabinet meeting once, and there was a lobby there. I think it was mothers trying to keep nurseries open. Not the most recent one, it was the first time round. And the two mothers talking would say, well, why is there a problem with him saying he hasn't got enough money, referring to the then mayor? And they said, he's just got to write a cheque, hasn't he? And that was it. That was, the and to some extent, of course, they were completely right, because that's all the mayor did have to do. But if the mayor had written a cheque, somebody would have to work out what cheque he was not going to write. So the whole concept of budgeting, really has got two parts. One is the political side. You can consult on that, but you should be doing that anyway in a sort of proper plan. And your councillors should be going out into the community, sort of talking about the councils and the leading groups, the major groups, majority groups, political priorities. And then you've got the actual budget setting. And we got round this all in Tower Hamlets by having some neighbourhood forums. I think it was in the days of the local area partnership forums, which cost so much money to the whole partnership idea, Tower Hamlets partnership, cost so much money to run that in the end, I think the bits of money they were able to give to the public to spend were utterly overshadowed by the amount of money that the bureaucracy cost to enable this so-called democratic exercise to take place. So each forum had something like £2,000, and it could decide where to spend it. So all the people who wanted better street lighting in the area would turn up and make their case, and all the people who wanted a bit of funding for the youth club would turn up and make their case. So all these budget forums did was actually pit the community against themselves, different groups in the community against each other. So I thought that wasn't a very good exercise either. I think you've got to get the consultation right.
Yes. No, consultation is an underrated subject. It's done well and done badly in different places.
I've obviously had the worst experience. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I've been always been a bit sceptical about doling out small amounts of money to the local forums for them to make decisions. I mean, where we've gone for sort of decentralised spending in Redbridge is on community infrastructure levy, whereby 25% of it goes to for community access. The community makes bids for that 25% every year.
Good heavens.
That seems to be working reasonably well, because there's a reasonable amount of community infrastructure levy knocking around in most wards in Redbridge.
That's interesting. In Tower Hamlets, the borough is strewn with the deceased and dying bodies of community activists who've tried to find out what Section 106 and community infrastructure levy the borough has ever had. There seems to be no central list. Although every now and then, when there is a budget, some officer will come out and say, we have this much in reserves. This came from Section 106 and it's all committed. This came from... So how do they know? If they know how much they've got in order to put in the budget, then how do they not know how much they've got when it comes to releasing lists? But anyway, that's one of life's less important mysteries. So you have it on
indeed. Local authority Cllr shouldn't be that difficult to know what the total is. As I say, it's divvied up in Redbridge, and 25% of it goes to the community in each ward to put bids in for community projects.
Okay.
At least that's that's actually devolving a power where people have actually got access to some resources. Because on the wider scheme of things, I mean, after 10 years of austerity and the COVID pandemic, the question in the future is that after we've met statutory spending responsibilities, whether there's going to be anything much left at all to spend after that from here on. So we're waiting to hear from the government on that subject, and then we can consult with the community about the £10 and 20p that's left to spend on everything else other than statutory services.
Paul, I've been asked to ask you to just speak up a little bit. There's some concern in the back room that you're maybe starting to get a little bit low, or mumble a bit, as I would call it. But
the Brummie inheritance, I'm afraid, yes.
Indeed. the only good thing is, I think, going to be our last point. So, dear listener, if you do want to call in, now is your last chance to do it. 0208 1234507. Ring in and ask and give us your opinion on being a mayor. So 2 more things to talk about in terms of mayors. I did notice that in the Newham report there was something about where there were developments, housing developments, residents getting very involved in those. Have you got any resident groups leading their developments, Paul? We don't get a look in around our way, of course. But...
well, we're moving it in that direction. We're looking at co-production on
yes.
council schemes. I mean, we have a little difficulty in Redbridge that not so much on the finance side, but on sites. We don't have that many sites in Redbridge.
Well, you got trees, haven't you? All your land is taken up with trees, isn't it?
Yes, and we're not going to cut down all the trees to build over them. And then that's all part of the ongoing green belt debate. But no, I mean, essentially we've only got 3 reasonably large council sites to develop, which are just we're starting consultation on the master planning side, and we are looking to involve the community and use co-production on those.
Well, good,
sites.
yeah. Good luck with that. I mean, it just sounds quite unusual saying you're a Labour council, so you should be well positioned to do that. It's still strange, I find, thinking of Redbridge as a Labour council, but you are. So
yeah, me too.
I
wasn't supposed to end up as a councillor here, more or less by accident.
Yeah, but
yes.
Obviously, in Tower Hamlets we went through the whole housing choice process during. It must have been the noughties, I guess, the first decade of the millennium. And what we found was there was massive consultation in the run-up to decide the decision on what was going to happen to each estate. Was it going to be sold off or not? Was mostly our choice. But massive consultation. It was all laid out exactly what the consultation would be. And the minute the decision had been taken, there was no further consultation and there was no mechanism to implement the views that had come up in consultation. But again, you're aware of that. So that's the big thing. It's not only
yes.
And I think really
I was heavily involved in similar in Hackney. I mean, the whole issue was very much finance driven on the basis that there was no money for councils to do refurbishment or regeneration, but housing associations had access to the finance. So I mean, it was very much a case of you can have nothing from the council or housing associations will give you a deal. So I mean, it wasn't a negotiation from strength position.
No, I mean, there's always been that pragmatism.
There's always been that consultation you do when there's only one deal on the table.
Yes, exactly. I mean, this is the point. Consultation then is bowdlerised and becomes just a fig leaf, isn't it? The clever ones, but I mean, there's always been a choice between when the government imposes restrictions on councils. For decades now, we've had this choice of going with a housing association to get something done or staying with the council but not being able to get it done. But in that housing choice process, in that Decent Homes, it was before Decent Homes, wasn't it? But that was the driver.
Decent Homes was a big improvement in my view. But...
The Decent Homes, which was the driver of the debate on ownership, the clever ones, I think, were actually the Tory councils, because they just set up an Almo, bunged everything into it. Almo's had special considerations. They got their refurb done. When it was done, they brought it back in-house. End of story. And bringing it back in-house meant that the capital value of that housing remained with the council, and the council could use it to borrow. But with, in Tower Hamlets, where we just tried to sell off everything we could piecemeal, we lost our assets, and the council is now the poorer for it.
Yeah, Hackney went the Almo route. I was involved in the Almo setup and ended up working for the for Hackney Homes at Elmo, and it was only going that route and getting the 2-star or 3-star rating that was required that released the Decent Homes money.
Yep.
But we did that in Hackney, and there was a massive amount of Decent Homes work done. Whereas places like Redbridge, which was then Tory controlled, they didn't get a successful Decent Homes bidding. They never got any Decent Homes money.
Really?
No.
Huh.
They were not. They were not successful on Decent Homes funding at all. So now we're catching up on that fairly big. There's only about 5,000 council units in Redbridge, but we're catching up on a massive backlog of repairs and refurbishment because absolutely nothing was done by the Tory council during that period because they'd missed out on all the Decent Homes money.
Amazing. Yeah. Whereas in Tower Hamlets, it was just done piecemeal. We were all handed over to housing associations who were supposed to be able to provide, and then quite often didn't. And we also lost a lot of housing. Housing has been sold off by the receiving housing associations. Open space has been built on to fund necessary works under Decent Homes.
The Samedo estate's been built on, as I noticed again the other day.
Has it? Oh
yes,
no, that's the East Thames properties behind it. I know it's full of cranes. At the moment, all the Samuda blocks are still intact. One housing group came.
Right.
You didn't count them.
I thought they'd started to knock them down.
No, the one housing group wanted to knock all 4 estates on the island down and start and just rebuild from scratch, but that was always a stupid idea, and they dropped it when they realised how stupid the idea was. And they also got caught out because they said there was a complicated thing whereby they said they were not redeveloping the area, they were retaining the same number of homes, so they wouldn't have to build any extra homes like you would if it was a new development or something like that. So they're going to move from just over 2,200 homes to 10,000 homes, but there would only be 1,300 and something council, social homes within it. It's such a nightmare keeping track of all this different homes. Have you got an 80% of a socially affordable home or what?
Change seems to happen very quickly on the island. All right, well, thanks for putting me right on that. I was too busy hanging onto the steering wheel and thinking about my the injection in my tooth to clearly make out what was going on down there. What was the estate at the top of the island by East India Dock Road, on the opposite the petrol station?
It's now called Blackwall Reach. It was.
Yes,
it's Robin. Part of it was Robin Hood Gardens.
Oh, Robin Hood Gardens. Yes, that's gone in its entirety. I noticed. Yeah.
Yes, it has. Which I thought was quite sad, but a lot of the residents did, particularly leaseholders.
No.
But
well, leaseholders is never an easy matter on.
We'll just have
I'm personally glad I was much happier living on the West Ferry than I would have been on Robin Hood Gardens, I think. I never quite fancied the look of that one, modernist though it was.
Well, it was, there's a rationale to it all, wasn't there? But it was just...
But indeed, I never quite understood why Tower Hamlets went down this route of disposing as much of its property as it could to
well, it was the third sector, wasn't it? It was I'll put words into his mouth here, but it was the Michael Keith diversification of urban regeneration theory that was probably about as ill-founded as the wealth trickle-down regeneration theory from the Thatcher government that we had put up with a couple of decades earlier. And the idea was that councils are monoliths; they're multitasked, so they can't do any one thing well because they've got too much to do. So you should take housing, and to offer tenants a real choice, you should have a variety of suppliers. So there should be some council housing if you actually had to have some.
Yeah.
But housing associations.
There's some merit in that.
It's not a bad idea, but in practice, in reality, it's got no meaning. I mean, it's like
Not if you've got, not unless you've got some real choice. No,
Yeah.
if your housing option is one offer to a particular provider, then it's somewhat limited choice.
So
but yeah, it's strange. I mean, in Hackney, we transferred a very small number of estates that were in pretty poor condition, that we had no funding source for whatsoever, to some to housing associations. But in Tower Hamlets, they seem to transfer the worst, or keep the worst quality stock within the Almo, and transfer the better stock to the housing associations.
Well, nobody wanted the worst stock, did they? Nobody wanted the worst stock. That's why they didn't transfer. That was another flaw in the system. One flaw was that the housing associations were happy, like, well, Toynbee was happy to get its hands on 4 estates on the Isle of Dogs because it was prime bloody development opportunity, wasn't it? But their balance sheet, which was under some strain, no end of good getting the wealth of the island properties. Anyway, that was that. And then, of course, Tower Hamlets was left with, this is the Michael Keith legacy, with having all these blocks, that some of them which still haven't been done, and there's still great arguments there's still a mismatch between officers appearing to want to knock down and rebuild, but not give the tenants the guarantees. So it's all a ridiculous legacy of ill-conceived political thinking, turning the borough's residents into a great big political football, I think.
Well, thank you for reminding me, because I had forgotten about Councillor Michael Keith. Well, way back in the past, I had forgotten that episode entirely. But someone will write a book about this one day.
What happened in Tower Hamlets, the absurdity can be shown by comparing the Samuda estate and the St John's estate, Alice Shepherd House, which technically is St John's. So you've got 2 blocks side by side, 3-bedroom flats. On the Samuda estate, which used to be council, but then was sold to a housing association, so it became sort of semi-private. There, we were, because we were supposed to be social housing, subject to decent homes standards. So there had to be investment in the properties, and the council couldn't invest, so it transferred the properties to a housing association. And the housing association did the investment for improvement. Did the improvements very badly, but that's a different story. But it did the investment by borrowing money from the bank. I think it was actually Barclays Bank, but borrowing money from the bank. So the tenants then had to pay in their rent for the bank loan, which funded the so-called improvements. So that was the social housing tenants investing in what was supposed to be public property. Meanwhile, next door, in similar one housing group property, there was someone I knew lived in a flat which the owner had bought. They were a private tenant of a flat which had been bought by an original owner and then sold on to a second owner. And so that was, by all measures, really a private flat. It was privately owned, it was privately rented. And so internally, that flat wasn't subject to decent home standards because they don't apply to private dwellings, only to public dwellings or social housing. And there, the tenant who lived there, the private tenant who lived there, was someone who was a very nice person, but she happened to be a cleaner. That was her job. And it happens, cleaners are not very well paid. So as it happened, she therefore was entitled to quite a lot of housing benefit. So whereas the rent in the social house, in the social flat, so it was around £600 for a 3-bedroom flat. In this flat that had been bought under right to buy, the private landlord was charging £1,200 for the rent. So there's this massive subsidy through the vehicle of housing benefit, public money going into private hands for a property that wasn't improved, and public tenants were paying for their own improvements in the public property. So the public money was directly subsidising the private landlord rather than the public tenants or the public stock. There we are. That's I think on that story. Correct. Well, we were supposed to be talking about local governance, and we almost have, We haven't actually touched on the fact that Tower Hamlets Labour parties have actually both got policy in favour of abolishing the post of directly elected mayor and having another referendum. Just like in Newham, the mayor has promised it. In Tower Hamlets, the mayor hasn't. Too busy sacking the workforce, I guess, or washing his hair. Who knows? So I think we need to bring that part of the discussion to a close. It's always interesting to discuss with you, Paul. But let me just before we go, I know you live near Whipps Cross Hospital yourself, but if we could just see the slide about Whipps Cross Hospital. Whipps Cross Hospital is being rebuilt, which ought really to be
planned to be rebuilt.
Yes.
Whether it is or not, remains to be seen.
I think all the signs are good because the condition of the hospital is of the building is supposed to be very poor, and so it's really costing a lot in upkeep and so on. However, of course, the trust that is down to rebuild it is known for having built the new Royal London Hospital, which was such a massive drain on resources and saw a lot of beds lost. So, sorry, can I just ask the production team to show the slide that we saw earlier in rehearsal about the Whipps Cross Hospital meeting tomorrow? Anyway, local campaigners, and we do rely on them always, are campaigning to make sure that when the new Whipps Cross Hospital is built, overall the provision of beds remains the same. There's the same number of hospital beds for everybody, and that it remains having a fully functioning A&E department. Okay, well, we seem not to be able to show that slide, but we there's a ping. At 5 o'clock, no, not at 5 o'clock, at 8 o'clock tomorrow evening, there is a Zoom meeting of campaigners who are trying to protect Whipps Cross Hospital's provision. There we are, yes.
Might be someone here that I know.
Yes, that's the details of the public meeting. It's always difficult to, you don't have to try to hurry and write down that Zoom link now. You can always go back to the recording of this show, which is available on the Vodcasts Facebook page. And you can see the Zoom link on that, or you can go to East London News where there's a news article advertising it. But if you have a chance tomorrow evening, do think about going along. It's important to those people who live near Whipps Cross Hospital because that's your hospital provision. It's also important to the people who live in the East London because that's our hospital provision. And if we get any more COVID, any resurgence, we'll need it again. And it's important to everyone in the Barts and the London Trust. Because the hospitals work together, and so it's all the resources are relevant to all of us. And if they can turn the Cllr Centre into a emergency hospital, it just shows you that beds, slack houses, it's only political will. It's not actually the money. So
they wouldn't have managed that Nightingale without the British Army. It was only the army that pulled that off.
That's a whole nother. Somebody had to give them the orders.
Anyway.
So the army can come and build a new Whipps Cross Hospital for all I can. So there we are.
Might be better than certain contractures as an option.
Let's start on that. Right, okay.
So I see I've got another Zoom meeting to join tomorrow night after I finish my planning briefing at 8 o'clock. So
I hope you'll be joined by many more East Londoners because it's an important one to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming along, Paul. Maybe we'll see you again in 3 or 4 weeks' time to discuss whatever the issues of the day are.
That's
so
right.
Keep safe in Redbridge, and
thanks for inviting me on.
Okay,
it's always good to wrap local government with you.
Good to talk.
More referendums now.
Oh, all right. Now we're getting ridiculous. Okay, that is definitely the end of the show. Thank you, dear viewer, for watching. We'll see you next week, 10 o'clock next Tuesday, and good night.